Hi folks, I wanted to return to this topic of authenticity, particularly as applied to the life of INFJs, because it's kind of a contested domain when it comes to people describing this particular type and what defines this particular type. You have on the one hand people who insist that authenticity is a core concern for INFJs, and that this explains, among other things, why Enneagram 4 is common for that type. And on the other hand, you have people who say that that authenticity domain is really more something that belongs to the FI function, and that INFJs are more often going to have lives that are defined by the danger of inauthenticity, giving in to the demands of the tribe, the FE function, and thinking that they can find comfort in that, but ultimately being embittered by it and leading subpar lives. So where do we stand? What is the INFJ relationship to authenticity? Just by way of a preamble, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is discussed at greater length in this new book of mine, The Infinite Soul, which is the sequel to The Ecstatic Soul. Now, The Ecstatic Soul is still available at the links below. You can easily find it in the description box. But also The Infinite Soul. And in fact, questions of authenticity, the good life, the richly meaningful life, the purposeful life, are really questions that are explored in this book. I would say that the prequel, The Ecstatic Soul, which many of you will have read by now, is more of an exploration of the INFJ psyche, trying to understand how it works, whereas this one is more about being embedded in the world today and how to lead, among other things, an authentic life. So, consider getting this book at the link below. It's all fresh out of the oven and it's already doing very well. And by the way, you can support me on Patreon down there. It's really helps me to continue release material. Even to have just a small support every month is massively helpful, so please consider it. Link is below. It's mostly to support me, but it's working toward a great cause. Now, the question of authenticity, what I would say about it is actually at the very heart of the questionings that INFJs encounter. In many ways, authenticity is more of a concern for INFJs than it is for INFPs, which might come as a surprise to you, because in much of the literature we tend to think of the INFP as the quintessentially authentic type, or at least the type quintessentially concerned with authenticity. Sometimes people would say to their detriment. They are so obsessed with the idea of leading just their life that they might pass by opportunities or show a certain level of rigidity when it comes to interacting with others or being in certain situations. Now, I'm not saying that this is not partially true, but the important distinction is this. I think that a lot of the authors, whether they are philosophers or writers, that are concerned with themes of authenticity are INFJ. And the reason is, I think the reason is kind of intuitive. If you are someone for whom authenticity is not an issue, you're most likely to just live it out, more or less subconsciously, because it's not an issue for you. In a sense, we humans, and this includes we INFJs, INFPs, ISTJs of the world, we tend to fall into reflective mode about a particular theme, like the theme of authenticity, when this presents an issue for us. It's a little bit like your man, some random guy on YouTube who will give you dating advice, tell you what to do, what not to do, the pitfalls to avoid. It's often someone who probably has experienced some struggling when they were younger and thought about it long and hard in order to attain this narrative so that they can organize it as advice that they provide on the internet. I would say a man whose skills at womanizing, or at least appealing to women, has always been kind of natural and effortless, will never have quite fallen into this level of reflection because they never had to. Well, if you accept this analogy, it's a little bit the same with authenticity. And this is why you will often find that INFJs are extremely acutely sensitive to this issue, because it is indeed an issue for them, it is indeed an issue for us, and therefore they have fallen into a state of reflection much of the time. In fact, oftentimes, throughout their entire lives. The main issue, if you like, since I'm really talking about authenticity being an issue for an INFJ, is the push and pull, and principally the two dominant functions of the INFJ being pulled apart. NI is very strongly oriented toward authenticity. This because NI is a very subjective function in many ways. It's oriented to the contemplation of unconscious contents, archetypes. It's symbolic and tends to express itself in a worldview that is very personal. But this worldview, being personal, is at the same time, if you like, expressed. It reaches out into the external world via an extroverted function, which is what you need to reach out into the external world and in many ways be functional in the world. And that will be done through the auxiliary function of the INFJ, which is the quintessentially tribal function, FE. Now, FE is directed to other people and does want, at some level, validation and approval from other people. It wants to be sure that it connects harmoniously to others. And in order to do that, it will tend to look for what makes people react positively to what one says, and will adapt what one says and the way one speaks according to those perceived expectations on the part of other people, the other members of the tribe. Of course, that presents the danger of inauthenticity, because assuming you have a quite personal message to start with, the more you tailor this message according to the expectations of others, well, the more your message will look like what your perceived expectation looks like, then it looks like your core subjective content that it was in the first place. So there is always a challenge for INFJs in preserving what you might call the NI vision. Some people know that I'm not a massive fan of that expression, but it works reasonably well at expressing the INFJ way of life, the INFJ worldview. Being an INFJ is a way of life. This is something that I emphasize in the Infinite Soul. There's going to be like this strong pull in one direction, but this desire, which is less felt in INFPs, for this worldview to not just exist in your head, but to be acknowledged, to have at least some people around you see it for what it is and say it's worth it. And that is always going to be the risk of the slippery slope toward the worldview dissolving, being sacrificed at the altar of acceptance by other people. Whereas an INFP sometimes might just say, fuck others, this is what I'm doing. For INFJs, there is this very strong importance of the authentic thrust of the NI vision, but it has to be balanced out against the need for approval that INFJs feel and express, and comes from their FE function. This deserves more exploration, which I will do in a later video, but this is the source of the tension and the source of authenticity being an issue for INFJs, and the reason why in our writings they can be so forensic about the way authenticity works and how human beings relate to authenticity. This is what you see in people that I think are INFJs rather than FI users like Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, and of course Dostoevsky. Okay, see you soon guys. Take care. Bye-bye.